So welcome everybody. If you came in on the sign above the warehouse, you can see the Community Virtual Library, CVL, has been helping the Dickens Project by striving to bring research projects here every year, and we have a brand new one this year. So if you enter the old warehouse and you go to the right of the right wall, you can walk down and find a seat. Just find a seat anywhere here in the audience, and I'll just sit right here on the second row. Leave the front row for those of you that like to sit up front. Everybody find a seat. And let me just say, as you're all sitting, that you can pan your camera around and see many parts of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. You can see Christmas past, present, and future. You can see Scrooge's tomb. And our latest research project, brand new this year for 2024 Dickens Project, is music in Victorian England. So I'm going to turn off my mic and hand our program over to Sheila.
Okay, so this is a slideshow done by my husband, Christopher Webber. I'm Sheila Webber. I married a long time ago and I took my husband's name. I actually was happy to do so because my maiden name was both boring and difficult to spell, so Webber was an improvement. And that's a link to his Wikipedia page. He's an actor, but mostly now he does writing, particularly music writing, reviewing opera in particular, but he's a specialist in Spanish music, but also he knows about a really wide range of music, and he's written a play that's been performed about Sullivan, and also directed Mikado in a production that toured internationally. And he put together these images basically from his knowledge. You'll see that there aren't sources, but he's extremely knowledgeable about music, and also has read an awful lot of Victorian literature, and his knowledge really comes from that. So I'll click the music that we'll also have going, which is from Gilbert and Sullivan's Thespis. Sullivan was the composer, Gilbert was the man who wrote the words. Actually, it might be a bit loud on top of me talking, but I'll just let you listen to this as an introduction to begin with. Probably this bit I haven't done in text chat, but I'll type something in. In fact, the big hits of Gilbert and Sullivan didn't happen until after Dickens' death. I'll just put that in the chat. Turn this off now. Oops, no, I'm just starting it again. Yes, so take Marley's advice, and if you slip down the music slide, or the media one, or sounds. Yes, for me, it was slipping down sounds that made it. Perhaps anyway, on I'll go. So, going forward. So, music making in Victorian England covered a huge range from polite parlour, piano to monster concerts at the Crystal Palace and Music Hall. And there's different slides about each of these with contemporary pictures. And I'm just adjusting my camera so I can see the screen a bit better. So all polite middle-class households boasted their piano, often the focus for parlour songs, flirtation and courtship. And I found a few Dickens quotations which I will read out, which covered this aspect. So the first two quotations are taken from David Copperfield, obviously all works of Dickens. It was a prettily furnished room with a piano and some lively furniture in red and green and some flowers. It seemed to be all old nooks and corners, and in every nook and corner there was some queer little table or cupboard or bookcase or seat or something or other that made me think there was not such another good corner in the room. I looked at the next one and found it equal to it, if not better. That's David Copperfield talking about Mr. Wickfield's house. And then another short quotation, and this seems to happen quite a lot in David Copperfield. We've got, there he sat, that's Mr. Wickfield, taking his wine and taking a good deal of it for 2 hours, while Agnes played on the piano, worked, and talked to him and me. So you get quite a bit of Agnes playing the piano while her father drinks rather too heavily in David Copperfield. That's awesome. And then I took a couple of quotations from the later on, which it indicates is an incident of romancing happening over the piano. Mr. Jack Maldon was there before us. Mrs. Strong, dressed in white with cherry-coloured ribbons, was playing the piano when we went in, and he was leaning over her to turn the leaves. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, Marley. And then I've got two quotations from Sketches by Boz, which is sketches more from his kind of journalist days. And this is when a family is having a holiday in lodgings in I think it's Margate, is a now rather decrepit seaside town in Kent. There were marriageable daughters and marriage-making mammas, gaming and promenading and turning over music and flirting. And the second one is of people who rent lodgings and having talking about their potential lodgers. Charming woman indeed, repeated little Miss Tibbs, more by way of soliloquy than anything else, for she never thought of consulting her husband. And the two daughters are delightful. We must have some fish today. They'll join us at dinner for the first time. Mr. Tibbs placed the poker at right angles with the fire shovel and essayed to speak, but recollected he had nothing to say. The young ladies, continued Mrs. T, have kindly volunteered to bring their own piano. Though I think that isn't that people just hauled pianos along when they were going out for supper. I think these are two lodgers, people who are going to lodge in the lodging house, and they're obviously the lodging house is lacking a piano, and these two lodgers are going to fill that little bit of gap. So moving on, also amateur chamber music was a staple of more intellectual households. I didn't pull out any of those, but there's ample examples in Victorian literature of the more intellectual houses forming little chamber groups. And certainly there was more people who could read music in the Victorian times than there are nowadays in the United Kingdom. And being able to make your own music and actually play instruments, I think, is really a bit wider spread then. With music by composers such as Mendelssohn and Schumann. So the Romantics from the continent were being also played in the UK. And then very important because it was available to everyone who went to church. Church music, including obviously Christmas carol singing, was equally important throughout Victorian society. And there's a lot of very good English church music, some of which is still sung. And I put in there a quotation from the Christmas Carol. An old man and woman, and this is describing a scene that Scrooge passes by. It's in a home, in someone's home. An old man and woman with their children and their children's children and another generation beyond that, all decked out gaily in their holiday attire. The old man, in a voice that seldom rose above the howling of the wind upon the barren waste, was singing them a Christmas song. It had been a very old song when he was a boy. From time to time, they all joined in the chorus. And then pubs have been a tradition for some considerable time in Britain, and communal singing in pubs was more common, certainly in Victorian times, than it tends to be nowadays, unless people are very drunk indeed. For ordinary folk, communal folk singing was a vital part of English rural and urban pub traditions, of men sitting around singing. And then London's huge Royal Albert Hall, built in 1871 in commemoration of Albert, Victoria's husband, and as a memorial to him, became the fulcrum of British national music, and that's sort of a contemporary picture of Royal Albert Hall, which hosts many, many concerts to this day. But popular music halls for the working class variety entertainment could be popular too. Spectacular rather than popular. Yes, and I think the spectacle there, which you can't see quite clearly, is something like Neptune rising from the waters. And some of these entertainments had, I think, for example, the Derby, which is a big horse race, the best horse race, kind of recreated actually on stage with real horses going across the stage, and lots of spectacles with real waterfalls and things like that, which brought in the crowds enormously. And monster concerts at the Crystal Palace, built for the Great Exhibition, were all the rage. The Crystal Palace, which sadly is no longer there because it burnt down. There is still an area in London called Crystal Palace, with a large radio TV tower, but no palace, no actual Crystal Palace anymore. And also popular theatres such as London's Alhambra mounted variety as well as opera and ballet, and I'm not sure if that's a thing in the country's variety. It's a programme of lots of different acts, and the most popular acts go to the top of the bill, and then in decreasing size of print, you would have the other people on the bill who might be kind of performing dogs, but kind of singers, comedians, magicians, jugglers, or all kinds of things. And that's some contemporary posts of the time. And finally, Sir Arthur Sullivan was a great Victorian composer beloved by all social classes. And yes, and he really was someone that's from the Queen to everyone on the street, because his music was very popular indeed. But as I said, it is evident if you read about it. It was popular with everyone, and he wrote church music, and his best-known works tend to be the music he wrote for the Gilbert and Sullivan operas, but the church music he wrote is also very fine, and he did write a couple of operas which are rather treated snobbishly, I think, in Britain. I was lucky enough to actually see one of them performed. It was jolly good. It's got tunes, it's got drama, and it's not really done often enough. And so I put there a link to the Sullivan Society, which has lots of information about his life and work. And so that is the end of the presentation.